Lori Ashcraft here again, your host for Viva la Evolution, which is produced by Recovery and Resilience Solutions, which is a training and consulting branch of Crestwood Behavioral Health. And today, just like I promised you last week, we're going to be talking about the peer support training program within Crestwood. This is an amazing project. And I think I love it so much because I always like to go to places that are not quite as likely, and people in places that aren't quite as likely. It's not obvious that this is going to work. And then it does. I love that. That's so much better. Anyway, so we're going to be talking with Chris and Jim. They're going to be telling us about the program, the project, which is a pilot project within Crestwood. Rutgers University is the part of the evaluation team. And okay, I'm not going to go on and on about it because I want you to hear directly from them. So let me bring them online and hear about the Peer Employment Learning Center, which is just one part of what a Recovery and Resilience does, but in my mind, it's the most exciting part. So here we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, folks, so as promised, here's Jim Ritchie and Chris Martin. They are the main engineers at this point on the PELC program and have a lot of history and a lot of investment in what happens there. So Chris and Jim, why don't you just get us started with, talk a little bit about the original vision and the idea of what we wanted to accomplish with this program.
Well, thanks, Lori, and hi, everyone. So glad to be, Lori, with you and Jim. I think the answer to that question goes way back a few years ago, Lori, and you were involved in that.
Yeah.
And that's when our little company of resilience merged with Crestwood. And we got together with Patty Bloom, UI, and Jean, and we imagineered what the next big bang, we could call it, in behavioral health services could be to really move recovery forward in a dramatic way.
Yes.
So what we kind of conceptualized on that weekend of working together was this concept called the Peer Employment Learning Center, where Crestwood has residential treatment centers. They're actually like psychiatric hospital settings, where we would actually do a peer support training program, much bigger, like almost an academy, a peer employment learning center, within the hospital setting itself. And for the folks who are residents, sometimes called by some patients in the setting, if they chose to, they could choose to become a peer support specialist. So we did our 2-week peer support learning for the 21st century class that we do all over the US and across in Singapore, etc. And we did that. We launched that there. The idea was to launch it there at the facility, and then when the folks went through the course and they completed it, they would do a 100-hour paid internship within that facility, so that by the time discharge came about, they actually had a professional certificate in the discipline of peer support, and they could choose to get hired by Crestwood, or maybe if they wanted to do peer support outside for another agency, they could. And so the beauty of that, I think the innovative concept behind that is, here people come for treatment, administered by practitioners, and they go through this peer support class, and they graduate as also people who will be providing recovery services. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like how the big thing started.
Yeah, that was the vision. Yeah. And what I'm remembering is that our licensing folks allowed us to, to use the training as the program. So in other words, they didn't go to anger management and all these other things. They came to this training, and that was actually the treatment program was actually the peer training. Yeah.
Jim and I know that this concept, like you said, Laura, is very innovative in the country, in the world. And actually, it kind of has its roots way back when in the 1790s in France with
Yes.
Dr. Philippe Pinel, who went through the asylums in France to on this campaign to eliminate chains and shackles. He
Mhm.
brought on a former patient in one of the asylums, Jean Poussine, and together they were able to do that. And as you remember, he appointed Jean Poussine as at one of the hospitals outside of Paris. And in a letter, Poussine wrote to Dr. Pinel and said, because he was the new administrator of the hospital,
Yeah.
as we've decided to hire all of our staff from a category of mental patients because we find they're more kind, more humane, and more able to do this work.
Yeah. Thank God he wrote that letter, so we have it
Yeah,
on paper.
we
Tim,
do.
I know as we went along, we learned a lot because, well, we've done a lot of peer training in other institutions. I mean, we did all that training in the penal institutions in Pennsylvania, hospitals in Phoenix, but we hadn't really done it in a facility like Crestwood. But I remember we had like 3 pages of lessons learned as we went along. Can you talk a little bit about what needs to happen in an organization for this to be successful?
Absolutely. So it takes a lot of planning, and first of all, we have to understand that each PELC is a unique. Each PELC rollout is a new event, right? And we build on it, and we're constantly learning. It's Chris likes to use the term learning laboratory, and it's very much like that because we're learning at least as much as the participants in the training to become peer support specialists. And so a lot of what has to happen is some significant planning around things that we only learned about after we started. And these are things like making sure that individuals, for example, are prepared themselves and excited about the work of peer support. And some of that can happen within the training and the interactions of the process. But you want to have at least a critical mass of people who are genuinely focused on that. And so, Chris has developed some curriculum around supporting individuals to understand what it's like, because there's a lot of educational trauma, we call it, with individuals who have been beat up by the school system, by the public school system or other school systems, and told they can't learn. When in fact, we know that all of these folks can learn very well. And so, we have this 2-day training that we implement. It's really a workshop. It's a fun-filled workshop that perhaps Chris can talk about more on later. But so that's part of it. Certainly working with staff and making sure that staff understand what their roles are, and we have to have buy-in from staff, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of meeting, and there's a lot of commitment that is involved. You can't just go in there and do it without the support of the staff and the administrator. So there has to be a lot of buy-in and a deeper understanding of the vision and what we're after, and we're happy to report that we see that buy-in. We're seeing shifts in staff and so forth, which we'll talk more about later.
Just let me stop you just a second, Jim.
Yeah.
This is a mistake that we've seen made across the country over the last 20 years, and that is training and hiring peers and putting them into a program where the setting hasn't been prepared. The staff don't know what peers are, they don't know what they do. They're sometimes a little threatened by having peers joined, or a little annoyed by it, or even if they're excited about it, they tend to not know how to really use the gifts that peers have. So I love all the preparation that goes into preparing the site at Crestwood before we even get the training started. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want
Not at all.
One more thing to our viewers. We tend to say the word PELC. Unfortunately, when you come up with your name, then you get an acronym, and sometimes you don't think about what your acronym's going to sound like because you're so excited about your name. So when we had Peer Employment Learning Center, we go, oh, what a great name. But then it turns out to be PELC. So when we say PELC, that's what we're talking about. Sorry, Jim.
Not at all. I think you're spot on. And to be generous, I'll use, this peer employment program, to support the.
You can say PELC now because we explained it.
No, the only other thing I would say is that that work has to be ongoing. And we'll talk about drift perhaps in our later segments, but there's a lot of intentionality that needs to take place by so many people in this to make it a success.
Well, and we don't have the corner on drift. I mean, any mental health program has to pay attention to drift, or all their good ideas drift away and they move into convenience. So as you're saying, I think we learned early on that we really have to pay attention to drift because we're a new program, where it's easier to drift back into what you used to do when you're introducing something new.
Some of the other things that we've learned along the way is to support the individuals in this program. We learned that we really need to coordinate with other agencies where a person might have, for example, justice involvement, and to support them getting their records expunged and things of that nature. And so aligning resources for the PELC participants for that, as well as other educational supports, literacy programs, GED preparation courses, finding out where they're going to discharge, what county they're going to discharge to, because we work closely with another agency called the Dreamcatchers, which supports which often supports individuals who don't directly get hired right away, and they get hired through Dreamcatchers to do work, to do peer work at various sites.
And so, just for our listeners, Dreamcatchers is another Crestwood program. It's a separate, I think it's a nonprofit, isn't it? Separate nonprofit status. But we kind of get the inside track on them because of the association. And Jim is so right. They've been so helpful in helping us create a employment learning situation for folks who need a little more help before they go straight to work. Yeah. And I just want to say a little other thing here. In general, anytime there's a transition, what we've learned is, this is not just true for us, this is true for everybody, but we've had to really learn it and integrate it. Anytime there's a transition, we've got to pay close attention to it. So whether it's a transition from the training to I hope you guys are going to talk about the internship. So training to internship, or internship to employment, or even discharge. That's a huge transition. So we're going to keep all the gain that we accumulated from the training. We have to pay close attention to those moments. So sorry, I keep interrupting you, James. I just get excited.
No, it's very exciting work. So, but to your point, I think it might help us, Chris, if you could explain all the components of PELC itself, of the Peer Employment Learning Center.
Sure. Good. Thanks. Yeah, you mentioned the culture, Jim, and that's really really relates to what that is. To bring peer support specialists into an organization, especially a hospital setting, it's important that the staff, first of all, understand what the peer support specialists do, and also themselves kind of model the same kinds of practices we want the peer support specialists to model. Years ago, Gene Johnson said that one way to help a recovery organization recover is when peer support specialists are brought on in critical mass. Because what happens is we not only see recovery outcomes changes through that, we see staff start to change in the way they do things. So creating this Peer Employment Learning Center and having interns, peer support specialist interns, come and do internship, we had to prepare the staff. And we wanted to see a cultural shift, actually. So part of that process, we took all of the leaders through a 3-day, we call it recovery practices for leaders boot camp. And it's 3 days of recovery practices as a leader. And they get a lot of tools and practices to use not only with the peer support specialist staff, but with all their staff. And the key, and I love Lori how you used to say a lot, that if leaders practice the kind of recovery skills in their leadership with all of their staff, then the staff will replicate those same principles and practices with the people being served. So that's the purpose. In that 3-day experience, leaders their direct reports do a 180 where they evaluate that leader based on how that leader provides recovery services in their leadership. And then the leaders come and they look at that confidential survey in the class, and that really opens them up to all the learning we do. Then we take all the staff members, from dietary to maintenance to recovery coaches, nurses, and so forth, in an 8-hour class called Recovery Practices for Organizations. So they not only understand what peer support is, but they also understand and get to practice what are these recovery practices that we use in the way we work with people. One way I like to think of it, Lori, is that instead of staff members being outsiders that come on the inside to do their work, we kind of help staff really orient themselves to be insiders doing inside work, because recovery really is an inside job, right? In the heart.
Yeah.
So that this insider kind of way of being is helping staff have real relationships with the people they serve and so forth. So that's part of the component. And then, of course, we take all the leaders through the peer support 2-week peer support learning class before they have the leadership class. And then we take the peer support specialist, the interns, the candidates for the class, into the 2-week PSL class, peer support class. Then they do the 100 hours of paid internship. We also train a number of selected employees to be mentors. And so a mentor is assigned to one peer support intern throughout the 100-hour paid internship. So they model peer support skills right along with the intern.
Yeah.
And then we have a formal graduation with cap and gown. And actually people can see that on our website, Laura. They can see one of the very first graduations.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It's on there. Yeah.
Yes. Get everything in?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let me just back up a little bit here. So there's the leadership boot camp, and then there's all the staff get trained in kind of an overview of recovery. And then it goes then to the PSL, to the peer training.
Then we take all of the staff in the hospital setting, the organization, through recovery practices for organizations. The leaders have been through their training now. Now we're going to do all the staff so everybody's on the same page and understand the recovery way of being.
So let me are these 3 trainings available to other people who want them?
Absolutely.
So if I'm in Kansas and I'm watching this podcast, I go, I wanted Chris to come and teach us that stuff. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, Jim, can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. These are all, there's a whole program. We call it the Recovery Practices Program. It includes the recovery practices for leaders with the Resilient Culture Playbook, and the recovery practices for org, and the 80-hour peer support learning for the 21st century, which, by the way, of course, for viewers outside of California or even within California, it is an approved California State Medi-Cal certification training. So we are one of the providers of that training for the state. But yes, these are absolutely available. You can check out our website, and if you're interested in any, they also can be seen as standalone training. So if you want to build out your project over a longer period of time, call us, work with us. We've got a lot of experience in this, as Chris said, not just within California, but across the country and other states and other counties, in other countries, as you know. So yeah, we can absolutely
Speaking of
about that.
webpage, our webpage just changed over the weekend. And if you're watching us now, you figured it out. But what happened is Viva La Evolution moved from learning and products over to, what's its new name?
Learning Resource Library. Excuse me, Recovery Resource Library.
Because so when you go into the page, click on that button instead of the old button, and you'll find us there. But if you're watching this, you already found us. So
yeah, and you can check out all the resources there for free, including Viva La Evolution, and there aren't going to be any overdue fees. So
yeah, there's a lot of free stuff there too. So yeah.
And I got caught off guard. It's Recovery Learning Library. So that's the page. And there's lots of resources there, as Chris said, including free downloadable trainings. Check out some of our products for free. Explore some of the other products on our training resources tab. Good stuff.
Yeah. And you know what I'd like to make available to people is that long list of lessons learned. I think that would be helpful for people. So can we just say, if you want to see the long list of things we learned from doing this Peer Employment Learning Center, we'll be happy to share that with you.
We can even, let's tighten up the list and put it on our resources page. I would be happy to do
put
that.
It on the page. Yeah.
I'll remove some of the things that are more Crestwood specific, because they may not, like contacting this person versus that person, that kind of thing. But some of the other lessons learned that are more globally.
Yes. So
absolutely.
This is a nice way to say we're going to show you our mistakes. Lessons learned, we're reframing it. And at least this way, you can make new mistakes. You don't have to remake ours. So should be helpful. Okay, what else should we share about the Peer Employment Learning Center that seems relevant?
Maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the amazing changes that have taken place.
Oh, good. Let's do that. What's happening there?
Well, we can talk individually about the folks who have gone through the class, previously receiving services in our organization and our facilities. And now many have been discharged. They're working as peer support specialists in our campuses and part of our staff. Yeah. And then all kinds of good things happen. We have one young man who graduated. He's going back to college to finish his degree. Right? So, the peer support specialists now are having a huge impact. Recently, Laura, I was in one of our campuses in San Diego, and the staff were telling me that whenever the peer support specialists teach the classes, it's like they're standing room only, and the classes go out way beyond the time. Their staff went, how are you guys doing that? How are you keeping people engaged that long?
Hey, what we forgot to say is, I mentioned it last week when I talked about this coming, is that this is a pilot program. There's 5 sites, and we're now just beginning the 3rd site. And the excitement Chris is talking about is San Diego was the 1st site, Bakersfield is the 2nd site, and we've seen really remarkable changes in both sites.
Amazing, yes.
And expect that to continue in the next 3. And I was going to say something else about that. Oh, here's what I was going to say. We started off wanting to have a really strong program evaluation around this. And Rutgers is our evaluation. Rutgers University is our evaluation partner. And we did our first round of research, realizing that we didn't have the best possible tool because we had amazing outcomes, like people graduated, completed the internship, and went to work. But the instrument didn't reflect, it reflected some changes. Don't get me wrong, but it didn't reflect some of the things that we knew were big and happening. So we've started a new design now to go back and pick up what we missed on the first time through. So, you know, we've got some eyes on us and some ears on us and keeping track of what we're doing. Yeah.
Awesome. Jim, on the lessons learned, you mentioned something about expungent. Do you want to share how we were able to support one of the interns with that?
Yeah, so we got involved with some folks who you really make it part of their life's work to support individuals in this area that we weren't dialed in with because we didn't know to ask this question. That's why it's a lesson learned, right?
Yeah.
But once we were able to do that, we were able to reach out to these organizations, and they have different names and different districts right across the country, and some district attorney offices are more than happy to work with groups like this. And yet there are also places that we've learned along the way where the DA isn't so keen on that. It's not a priority for them. So it comes down to really individualizing the support, linking the individual PELC graduate with the right people to, and it takes some work. It takes accountability and work on the part of the participant. And that's part of the peer program in any case is developing, a sense of accountability because we're turning out professionals. And so individuals are encouraged and empowered to be their best selves, right? And so they have to, once it's out of our hands, once they discharge, they're not necessarily on their own. We'll support them where we can, but we link them up with the resources, and it is, we'll continue to support them in a peer kind of way to empower them to complete the steps and encourage them to keep moving forward, even though there might be periodic moments of discouragement. For example, if you have to pay a fine that you weren't aware of, right? And now you have to save up some of your money that you're earning to pay that fine. And that can take a while. Yeah. And that can be seen as a little bit of a setback. But we know of an individual who was able to do that, and the satisfaction they got from being able to save up and then pay those fines and get their record expunged. That was really, in and of itself, some pretty important recovery growth.
Absolutely. And,
yeah. And did that person get hired by it?
That person is hired. Absolutely.
As a resource specialist.
I just want to go back and shine the light on the internship, because we know most peer employment training programs require an internship. And this can be a real roadblock because it's hard to find a place that will offer an internship to peers. And that's just built right into the Crestwood model, and Crestwood even pays. To get a paid internship for peer support, it's amazing. So that is just a wonderful element that's added into this program.
Well, and I just wanted to add, one of the lessons learned is to really support the for folks out of the state. So a lot of our participants are on conservatorship, and which means that they've lost certain rights, including the right to control their own money. And so we work with the conservators and of course with the participant to talk about what the impact will be on their SSI or SSDI, because you're only allowed to earn X amount of dollars per month. I think it's like $85 a month, and then it's you get your benefits get reduced by 50 cents on every dollar you earn above that minimum. And there's always a lag time, so like a 3-month, 4-month lag time before those cuts start kicking in. And so part of the lessons learned is really about making sure we manage those expectations and support the individual to recognize that even if their benefits are being cut, they're being cut 50 cents on the dollar to what they're earning. So
they're still ahead.
Still ahead. Yeah. And feeling like they're making a contribution. That's one of the more important pieces of all of this.
That's the most healing part of the whole thing, I think.
Yeah. Lori, the internship also has a structured learning evaluation coaching process that the mentors are trained to use.
Mm.
so that the peer support special intern really gets to receive a growth opportunity. And what's awesome is that when the person is discharged, the peer support, they get certified peer support specialists now, they get discharged, they have on their resume 100 hours of internship, paid internship.
Yeah, so there's work experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
in a hospital-like setting. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
pretty amazing.
yeah, hard to get. Yeah. Well, I know there's been some surprises and challenges along the way. Can you just quickly maybe tell us a little bit about that?
You want to start, Jim?
Sure. Well, I would say, and one thing that we didn't necessarily seek to capture in our Rutgers work, and that is really what happens to the staff through a PELC. You know, what happens to the, I mean, we understood about recovery culture and how important that is, right? And we can talk more about that, but specifically just seeing like a sea change in staff attitudes, because as you know, systems operate under this medical model where we want to protect people from themselves. We want to wrap people in bubble wrap. We want to prevent them from falling down and skidding their knee. And so we wrap them in that bubble wrap typically, and we don't let people learn through challenges, you know, through disappointments and through mistakes, right? And one of the surprising things, I think for me, the most surprising thing is to see the attitudes of staff change in that regard.
Yeah.
You see staff stop disempowering people and they start empowering people. They recognize that, oh, this actually can work. This actually does work. Because there's a lot of skepticism. Again, based on that, you know, somebody's broken and they need to be fixed, and my job is to fix them. And that's not our job at all, right? To fix people. Our job is to empower people, because people can fix themselves, and including staff and organizations. And we're seeing that happen, and it takes time.
Yeah, yeah.
The other side of that, which was learning for us also, is that, you know, we've talked in our peer support learning class a long time ago about, and still to talk about it, is that when you mentioned role shifting, Lori, when peers kind of role shift into becoming a peer support specialist, now it's like a new role, being a person providing services to the person receiving. And whiplash that can happen from that is the person still sees themselves as a quote unquote, you know, patient or, you know, person receiving services as opposed to provider. So we've learned to kind of support and work with our peer support specialists in doing recovery tune-ups to help them.
Yeah, yeah.
Also learned lessons that staff can also have whiplash from role changes. And the role changes that Jim is describing, we really see that. We've also had some hiccups where staff starting to say, wait a minute, can these people be confidential? You know,
it always comes up. That's the first. Can they look at the records? Oh,
yeah. And of course, if anybody knows how to be confidential about records, it's people like us who've had files, right? Written down.
Yes.
And I mean, now this person's going to be working alongside me, and you know, so all of this kind of whiplash from role shifting is also true for the professional staff.
Yes.
And we've learned to kind of do a lot of supporting with that.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about a few people already. Are there any particular recovery stories that really stick with either of you or both of you?
Yeah, I'll take one. I know Jim has several too, but one that comes to my mind right now is a young lady who, in the class we did, if you were any outsider would have come into the class on the very first day, maybe we're there for the very first 2 or 3 days, and they would say who would make it and who wouldn't. They would have chosen this particular lady as someone who wouldn't have made it through the class. And not only did she make it through the class, she graduated, did her internship, and now is an amazing peer support specialist. Incredible. Inspires even her coworkers, That's one that I can think of. What about you, Jim? There's so many.
And I just want to clarify, is this person looking to work full-time now?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the person you're referring to.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I have a similar story again, and I think this just speaks to sort of the mindset, the going back to this idea of capital R recovery, I call it, big R recovery, where it really is a mindset. It's a way of being. It's a way to see the world, and so many people get prejudged. I mean, we were all prejudged, right? I mean, whether we could do something or not do something based on, our symptoms or how we were presenting. And you see folks, and this one woman in particular, I was just drawn to have a conversation with this person because she was kind of looking down at her shoes and just kind of looked, like I assumed people would assume that she couldn't make it through this class. And so I wanted to have a conversation with her because I wanted to empower and support her just on a person-to-person level. And I learned in that conversation some amazing things about this person, a very accomplished person. And I could see that she had been disempowered, right? And I watched her, through this curriculum that you and Chris developed. I watched this person just completely blossom, and she's amazing. She's doing amazing peer support work now. Super inspirational, super powerful in her, not only her story, but how she does the peer support work itself. So there's so many to name. There's so many people like this that people will easily write off, and we see people part of our planning in these new PELC rollouts is so we have to manage our expectations that some staff are going to be like, oh, this person can't do it, or this person can't do it, and we have to go in there and kind of like understand that this is going to happen so that we can navigate it.
So we don't limit it in any way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lori, I know you know this and Jim knows this. For our viewers, they may or may not know this, but one of the beautiful things that happens in the class is something called collaborative healing. And so they're doing peer support with each other. And then I love to always quote Viktor Frankl, who conceptualized that, when people start to have meaning in their life, they start to heal. And that's what we see happen as a progression in a 2-week class. I mean, it's incredible. You see healing, and people start to see, wow, you mean all the stuff I've gone through, it means something?
Yeah.
It's a gift, it's a credential.
It reframes it. You can rewrite history that way. Because it reframes something awful into a gift. It turns a struggle into a gift. Yeah. And
So,
excuse me, Jim, just a second. Another thing that along these same lines that you guys are talking, I mean, how many times have we heard people say, we heard it in Pennsylvania when we went into prisons, we heard it in Arizona when we went into hospitals. We hear this thing, well, what? An 80-hour class? These people can't sit still for that. They don't have the attention you can't hold their attention that long because they've never seen it before. So of course they think that, but that hasn't been a problem in these classes.
No.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that, Chris and I we were in Poland at the IACME conference in Warsaw, at the University of Warsaw, Poland. We were invited to speak on this project. And one of the audience members and during our presentation, or, during the Q&A, said that this sounds very American. What we were talking about sounds very American. And I asked her for clarification. What do you mean by that? She said, well, it just sounds so pie in the sky. And I said, well, again, what does that mean? Like, I don't understand your question, really. Can you help me? And she said, well, you're suggesting that they all get cured. And I had this conversation with her about, this idea that cure sounds like a medical term, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about recovery. And she said, well, that is cure. Recovery means cure. And I said, well, there's a lot of more information behind recovery than what you're perhaps giving it.
Mhm.
And it's this prevailing attitude that just exists out there, that people, there's a timeline that is the same for everybody in getting to some place of life satisfaction and life skills.
Yeah.
And we see it in the class. I mean, there are people who take a little bit longer to progress and get to where they want to be, but it's on their timeline, right? That's part of the whole process, is to recognize how to support people
Yes.
on their journey.
Yes.
Yeah. Gloria,
And-
I would encourage folks who are watching to check out our website, because we have a video on how we teach our classes, and that has also a lot to do with it. And
holding attention.
yeah,
And I just want to back up a little bit. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but the reason you folks were in Poland is because there was an invitation to work with Ukraine around
Yes.
the workforce.
yes,
If we go down that rabbit hole, we'll be here. We'll be right up there with Joe Rogan and his 3-hour
yeah,
podcast. I don't know how he does that. But anyway, I just wanted to shine the light on that.
yeah.
And speaking of pie in the sky, we do tend to run on a high level of
Yes,
optimism and enthusiasm.
Mhm.
But now
absolutely.
and then something takes us out, maybe one at a time or all at once.
Mhm.
Could you just briefly talk a little bit about what some of those things are and how you pull out of it? I can go first if that'll give you a chance to
Anytime.
speak.
Yeah.
For me, it's never the peers. They
no.
never take me down.
Mhm.
And it's rarely the training circumstances. For me, it's the bigger picture that I get discouraged around, like system issues that in my mind go backwards,
Mhm.
like move more and more into restrictive kinds of services, or other powers that be, whether they're counties or conservators or states that have old ideas about treatment and just can't let go of them. I mean, never mind that they were trained in them 40 years ago, they still think they're the absolute truth, and doing anything different is compromising with divine information. That's what takes me out, to have to go back and try to figure out how to move past some of that stuff. I don't know what takes you guys, but I can get over it. I mean, because then I go back and see the peers or whatever. Doesn't matter. We're going to do this anyway. What kind of things do that to you guys?
I think it's really easy for people. It's happened to me when we allow ourselves to get bogged down in problems and what's not working.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of pulling ourselves to a place of solution seeking, right?
Yeah.
And I think part of that is keeping ourselves connected to the vision and not getting trapped in this "we've never done it this way before" kind of mentality.
Yeah, right.
That's one thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, that's good. Me too, Chris. Yeah. Thank God we're not doing it the way we used to do it.
Yeah.
What about you, Jim?
Well, I don't think my enthusiasm ever wanes.
Okay.
I can get upset though. I can sort of start to internalize, what I like to reframe as roadblocks. And one of the things I learned that helps me is that because there's always like typically an individual who's representing some sort of view that's outdated, who's a decision maker who's kind of holding up the process, right?
Yes.
And one of the things I learned is to remove it from the person and think about what part of the process can I, and this is going to Chris's idea, what part of the process can I positively impact to navigate this, right? Rather than rather than be angry at a person,
Mm-hmm.
and rather than be angry, frankly, Although anger can be good sometimes, like it can sort of spark that movement, like David Hawkins talks about, right? But it's really to redouble and focus on what part of the process can we develop to support a deeper understanding of what we're trying to do. And that, you know, there's no one answer on that, because even though it's, you know, and I've said this before in one of your podcasts, you know, recovery is simple. Like the concept is simple, you know, empowering people, listening, those are simple things, but they're hard, right?
Yeah.
They're simple, but they're hard to do. And that's the problem. That's the challenge, I should say.
Well, they're hard until you get in the groove of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're second nature, I think.
Right. Yes.
You guys do it as a second nature. Yeah.
But making that shift, you know, getting over that hump.
Yeah.
Well, Lori, one other thing. Yeah, that's good, Jim. But one thing that I think can get in the way is lack of imagination. I like to borrow Disney's term of Imagineering. We need to do Imagineering in our organizations. And so when we start to Imagineer and have a different vision for ourselves, that's what we ask people being served to do, right? Have a vision for themselves. When we also do it, and like in the Peer Employment Learning Center, the staff who were previously staff in a facility who provided services in a hospital setting now are faculty members in the Peer Employment Learning Center. And they have actually a learning stake in everybody they serve to support this creation of an amazing completion and graduation, right?
So reframing the whole situation.
That brings passion, right? So we can just start to have imagination and vision for ourselves.
That's great. Absolutely. I used to, when I worked for Pam Hyde, she used to have this little card on her desk, and it said, "Tell me the third way." In other words, you know, we usually come in, well, we could do this or we could do that. And, you know, it doesn't get to that level of imagination that you're talking about. So she always encourages, go beyond the obvious. Find me a way that's creative and new and has a lot of energy in it. And in closing, you know, as I just think back on what we've talked about today, I hear spirit. I hear spirit in it. And Chris, you and I have done a lot of training on organizational spirits, how to mobilize the spirit of an organization, how to help people get in touch with their own spiritual resources and bring those to the creation and the problem solving and the enthusiasm. Do either of you want to say anything more about how spirit comes into the work we do?
I just like to add something there, Lori. First of all, I think recovery also takes place in the spirit.
Yes.
You know, years ago in that training you were talking about, we talked about 4 different spiritual competencies: prayer, meditation, contemplation, and service to others. And what's so beautiful about the work we do, peer support is about serving others. And so we like to call it, you and I in our curriculum, peer support is a sacred discipline.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And, you know, helping people connect to that, I think, is very important.
Critical. Yeah. It's a resource that we forget to use. You know, we're so into our heads. And moving down to the heart, which is connected to the spirit, that's where the real stuff happens.
Yes.
Did you want to add anything, Jim?
I just want to put a check mark on what Chris said, you know, and what you're saying, you know, that it's that heart to heart spiritual connection as humans, as beings in the universe, you know, sharing together. We're not alone. That's the beauty of peer support. It creates those connections that doesn't leave anybody out.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for spending a little time with me and explaining all the intricacies of the PELC the Peer Employment Learning Center, and just sharing some of the things that need to be overcome and some of the joys of the successes. Really heartwarming joys. So thanks very much, and we'll have you back for another conversation. And have a great day. Whew, well, there you have it, folks. I just love this project, and you can probably see why. And if you want more information on it, please let us know. On our website, there's a place where you can ask, or you can just get in touch with us, however, email, phone, whatever you want to do, and we'll be happy to tell you more about it. You can journey along with us as we engage in this amazing experiment together. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen next week because I'm not quite sure, and I keep telling you the wrong thing, and then anyway, so it'll be next week will be a surprise, and it'll be good. So I'll see you then. Thanks for joining us. Love being with you. Bye for now.